Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about everything postpartum, but more specifically my postpartum journey. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Maddie. I'm 23 years old and I have had 3 babies back to back to back. So in today's video, I'm gonna cover everything from postpartum to labors, pregnancy, birth, mental health, and physical health. I really wanna focus this video on just because what you look like on the outside does not mean it is a reflection of what is going on inside and under all of these clothes. There's a lot of loose skin, there's a lot of stuff going on. This is definitely a personal kind of video, but I am definitely an outspoken kind of person, especially when it comes to birth and pregnancy and all that stuff. I love to talk about it, ask anybody. I am a pretty open book about this stuff, so let's just get right into the video. So first I want to start off with what my mental and physical health was like before I got pregnant. I feel like that is very important. So before I got pregnant, I was fresh out of high school. I always weighed around the same range of like 97 to like 102 pounds at most, very small. Always petite, always got comments about how small I was. And it wasn't that I ever had any body image issues. My metabolism was just super fast. And then when I entered high school, that's kind of when like the whole thick thing was going around and I had 0 curves to my body like whatsoever, and that definitely played a huge role in my mental health. I wanted to look that way. I didn't like being skinny, and the fact that I was also struggling with like severe depression and anxiety during high school. Sometimes I would get so anxious that I just wasn't hungry. So it was never that I was afraid to look bigger. I've always wanted to be bigger and gain weight because I've never liked looking small, and that is what my body and mental health was like before I got pregnant. So I was 19 years old when I got pregnant with Landon, and I had him shortly after I turned 20. I gained anywhere from 27 to 30 pounds, and that is my favorite part of pregnancy, is the fact that I could gain weight because I loved the way that I looked. When I first found out I was pregnant though, I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, there's literally absolutely no way that my body is going to be able to grow a baby. I was honestly so scared that it was gonna be painful, that I was gonna look atrocious, like I was gonna look like this and then this is gonna be my stomach. Like my body is a stick and then there's just gonna be like a huge basketball attached to me. I thought my skin was gonna look awful, and surprisingly that didn't happen. I rocked Landon's pregnancy. I wore heels 3 weeks before I had him at my baby shower. I felt amazing. I dressed up all the time and it was actually a really good experience physically. I also did not work out once during my pregnancy. I didn't work out ever. I didn't really eat super healthy. I was kind of very excited to eat whatever I wanted to because I was pregnant. My boobs literally were gigantic and it gave me excruciating back pain. Like it hurt so bad, and I was not expecting that. I honestly had no idea how much my boobs were going to change. Like no one had talked about that. Hadn't heard anyone really talk about it in a video on YouTube, which is where I got most of my information about pregnancy. So those were honestly like the biggest changes during my pregnancy. As for mental health, it was definitely up and down. I felt very, very ashamed because if you asked anybody who knew me, I was probably the last person who you thought would have gotten pregnant as a teenager. I grew up in a Christian home, you know, no sex before marriage. I wanted to wait until marriage, which I obviously did not. So the guilt of that really weighed heavy on me. I was very self-conscious of what people thought of me, and I have always been very self-conscious of what people think of me. It's something I still struggle with. I also felt kind of ashamed of my body and the way people were looking at me. Just because I wasn't comfortable with how I looked, I just perceived that everyone else kind of felt the same way about me, and things changed very fast, very drastically. I also lost a lot of friends. Like a really huge majority of my friend group I no longer talk to. I was really hurt. I felt very, very, very alone. It was really a depressing time for me, but it did get better. So my second pregnancy was actually a chemical pregnancy / early miscarriage. I miscarried my second pregnancy around 3 or 4 weeks after I had found out, and that was about 6 months postpartum from Landon. My pregnancy test never got darker. I noticed that every single day the lines weren't getting much darker. I thought I was just super early along because my first pregnancy test was like as soon as I peed on that thing, like the first line was bright red. I remember waking up one morning and just being in excruciating pain, like I felt like I was in labor, and I ended up going right to my OB office, did all the tests, and that's when he told me that I was having an early miscarriage. I honestly thought I was gonna have trouble having kids after this, so to keep my mind off of it, I ended up getting a serving job. So a couple days after I was hired, I took another pregnancy test because I wasn't feeling well, and it was positive. And that brings me to my third pregnancy, which is Darin's pregnancy. I would say my body was pretty much the same from my first pregnancy. Like my body literally just did all of the things that it was doing again. So like nothing really hurt. My boobs were already stretched out. The only thing is that I was really tired. I was constantly on my feet, and it wasn't until the end of my pregnancy where I started experiencing a lot of things that I wasn't with my first pregnancy. Like I had horrible lightning crotch, like SPD or I think it's called that. I can't even remember, honestly. My nausea was really bad, especially because I worked in a restaurant. As soon as I walked into that place, I wanted to vomit all the time. And I was also chasing after a toddler, so I was really exhausted. I couldn't listen to my body when it was like, hey, you need to slow down. I kept pushing through. My stomach pretty much grew the exact same way too, so nothing really changed too much during that pregnancy, except for the fact that I was super tired and my body knew it needed to rest, but I didn't have the ability to do that. Mentally, I think I was doing pretty good. I was super excited to get pregnant with Darin, so it wasn't scary like it was with Landon, where I was just like terrified and embarrassed and like ashamed. Like I was saying, like I was really excited. I knew I could handle more kids. I was obsessed with Landon, and I was so excited for him to have another sibling. My third and last pregnancy. I laugh even though I should be crying. I'm gonna touch more on this in the postpartum part, but a couple months before I got pregnant with Hudson, I weighed about 94 pounds, which is the lowest that I had ever weighed before. I went through a huge depression. My anxiety was through the roof. Stress was way up there. I was just not doing well. But a couple months after that, I ended up dragging myself out of that hole. I was doing way better, and then COVID hit. Kevin was so excited, and I knew I could handle another baby. That's not what I was scared of, but I was scared of like, is my body going to be able to handle this? Like I did struggle towards the end of Darin's pregnancy. Like that was hard on my body. You're supposed to wait 18 months in between each pregnancy, and I was waiting less than half of that. So I was very, very nervous how my body was gonna respond. And honestly, everything was fantastic, like chef's kiss, up until like the beginning of like 20 something weeks. It's so funny because I did a pregnancy update in my car where I was like, everything's great, I'm feeling fantastic. And then my next pregnancy update was like 3 weeks later, and I was like, y'all, I'm dying. Like I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Like this is so awful. Things took a turn for the worse during that pregnancy. I was putting a lot on my body. My husband had left for the Air Force, I think around like 14, no, even before that, I think like I was 12 weeks. He left the day after our wedding, and then I was constantly lifting a toddler and infant in and out of the car, in and out of the shopping cart, in and out of the house, in the crib, out of the crib, in the tub, out of the tub, always lifting things. I mean, I was by myself for a good 3 months, so I was just putting a lot of weight and damage on my body, and it definitely showed. I was also going through a lot of stress during that time. Like my mental health, I wanna say I was doing really well, but I think I was suppressing a lot and like just telling everyone like, no, like I got it, like I'm doing well. I've said this multiple times before, but I had 2 minor strokes and I had to go see a neurologist for it. I've never told anyone this, but I was supposed to be on modified bed rest, but it was not an option for me. My husband had just come back from the Air Force, had to get a new job. I was watching 2 kids. So that really put a dent on the progress that I should have been making physically. I had extreme migraines that ended up putting me in the hospital, and that was just excruciating. Like that was horrific. I never want to experience anything like that again. My pubic bone was separating. I was having trouble walking. Every single step literally felt like someone was just like taking a hammer at my pubic bone. Like no joke. I didn't even know that that kind of pain existed. There were some nights where I couldn't even sleep. My insomnia was so bad. I would literally lay awake sometimes and just cry because I literally felt like I was going insane. I also had cholestasis, which is when your liver bile like freely floats throughout your body and makes you itch. So I mean, like I was itching like really, really bad, and it was like always late at night, and it started to be every single night. And I was like, this is too consistent to just not be something more concerning. So I went to my doctor, and she was like, yeah, you have cholestasis. So I had to go in for extra visits to be monitored. I think it was like the stress test. I had to get one of those like twice a week. The stillbirth rate after 36 weeks with cholestasis is extremely high, so I had to be induced a whole month early. Now I have big babies, but the nurse told me he was probably gonna weigh around like 5 pounds. He was 7 pounds 4 ounces. And I was in so much pain. Like, I was really big this time around, and because of everything that I was going through, like, I didn't even really take that many pictures of myself being pregnant. Like, I really think I only have 3 pictures. All right, now let's talk about birth. My birth with Landon was amazing. I did so much research, watched so many birth vlogs, like learned so many techniques. The fear of pain really intensifies my anxiety, so I just wanted to be prepared, and I'm so glad that I was, because it was a great experience. I did have an epidural with Landon. I think I was in labor for around 8 hours, and I pushed for 30 minutes. And then after I had him, I remember after I was all cleaned up, like Kevin's dad and brother came in the room, my mom and my cousin were there, and I was literally just sitting there like, what just happened to me? I was an emotional mess. Like, even bringing Landon home from the hospital, I just sat in his room and cried. I had such bad anxiety. I never wanted to be away from him. And I didn't even know postpartum anxiety was a thing. I just thought it was my anxiety in general. I was constantly afraid something was gonna happen to him, or constantly afraid something was gonna happen to me, and then he would never like have a mom. Like, those are the thoughts that always went through my head. So mentally, I was struggling a lot after Landon's birth. But then fast forward to Darin's birth, it was horrible. I think I labored naturally for like 20 hours, got the epidural. It worked for about an hour, epidural failed. I also received fentanyl, which I think I explained in like my postpartum video after I had him, and that gave me horrible anxiety. Like, I was terrified. I had like the shakes too. Overall, that was a horrible experience. Hudson's birth will go in the books as the best birthing experience I could have ever asked for. Now, after experiencing Darin's birth, I was terrified. I was like, this is gonna be a crap show again. I'm so scared. I watched a lot of Bridget Tyler's videos. I'll link her down below. She is a birth doula. I watched all of her videos on like how to labor, like just all sorts of things to prepare myself. And because I was induced, I had nurses constantly checking on me, which made me feel better. I was in labor for I think like 4 hours or something like that. It was literally insane, and I pushed twice. I also forgot to mention that I only pushed for like 3 times with Darin, and he came out instantly, and same thing with Hudson. I also felt a ring of fire with Landon and Darin, but not Hudson. I only felt pressure, and I did get an epidural with all 3 of my babies, but Hudson's was just so empowering. I believed in myself so much. I was like, you can do this. I was so close to going naturally. I got an epidural at 9 centimeters, and that's only because I was told to come in at 9 o'clock for my induction, and they didn't even put me on medicine until like 11:30. And I can make a whole video on his birth story. I don't know if I have or not, honestly, but it was just 10 out of 10 the best experience ever. Afterbirth contractions. I didn't know these were a thing, but I can honestly say they get worse after every single baby. Afterbirth contractions are probably the worst thing ever. I didn't even know that they were a thing until after I had Landon, and every time I would go to nurse him, like my stomach would be in so much pain. I thought I was like in labor again. So every time you breastfeed, it basically sends a message to your uterus to like contract back down to size, which is just insane because it takes 9 months for it to get as big as it does, and then after like a week or 2 it goes right back down to its regular size. So the first time I only experienced them for like the first couple days, and they weren't too bad. After I got like Tylenol and stuff, it went right away. With Darin, same thing happened. They were a little bit more intense, but with Hudson, it would get so bad that I would have to like unlatch him, put him down, and like I would just be like shaking and like cold sweats because I was in so much pain. Like, I would cry. I would continually ask to like get my medicine, because with my other two babies, like the nurse would come and be like, oh, here's your Tylenol. I never really knew why they were giving me Tylenol. I was just like, all right, like I guess I'll take it, you're the nurse. But with Hudson, I would call them and be like, hey, like how long until I get like my Motrin and Tylenol, because a girl is struggling over here in excruciating pain. All right, postpartum recovery. My recovery postpartum with all three of my babies has been extremely different. I would say my postpartum after my first baby was probably the worst, just because my body had never gone through anything like this before, and mentally I wasn't really preparing to have a baby so young, so I was experiencing a lot of challenges in my social life and like how I viewed my body. And I just think in general, like my expectations were through the roof on how my recovery would go. Because I had experienced depression before, I never told my doctor when they would ask me that I had had depression in the past. Every visit that you go in, they'll usually be like, have you ever experienced depression, blah, 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 blah. I'd be like, no. Because I didn't want to be medicated. Like that is the thing that was always in my mind, that they were going to push me to go on medicine. I did not want to go on medicine. And I also didn't do any research on postpartum depression. It was one of those things where I was like, out of sight, out of mind, like I'm not gonna experience it. There's no reason for me to go down that road and even learn about it. So my body postpartum after Landon was probably like the most dramatic change, obviously just because I had never had a baby before. So like I said, I had really bad stretch marks on my hips. I had them on my butt, and there was one on my butt that literally looked like someone knifed me. And I was like, is this ever going to go away? Like I was just spiraling, like looking at my body. I was like, I look so gross. My boobs were huge. I just did not feel like myself. My hips did get wider though, that is for sure. But as for stretch marks, I didn't get any stretch marks on my stomach. I got a lot of them on my hips, on my butt, and my boobs. Y'all, my poor boobs. Rest in peace to those beautiful things. I could literally throw a tit over the shoulder. TMI, I'm sorry, like you were warned in the beginning of this. Also, after my first baby, my bladder was completely shot. Around 3 months postpartum, I was jumping on a trampoline and literally started to pee myself. I cried for a couple days after that. There were just a lot of changes, and because I was also experiencing postpartum depression, it was just not a good time. I also felt like I didn't have anyone to really talk to, so I kind of just kept it all to myself. I put a fake smile on. I tried my best to show everyone that I was okay, but like inside I was hurting really badly. I think a lot of my postpartum depression really played into the fact that I was so young. All my friends were in college, they were partying, you know, I lost a lot of my friends. I hated the way people looked at me. I would get looks when I would go into the store with Landon. I just felt like everyone was just like taking a huge crap on me all the time, and it made me feel like that about myself, and I felt like that about myself for a long time until I eventually got out of my postpartum depression, and that was like a couple months before we started trying for Darin. Postpartum with Darin was absolutely amazing. A girl felt as light as a feather. I got all my energy back. I went home and I was cleaning. I was playing with Landon, I mean as best I could, but I felt so good, and my recovery like down there, so good. Didn't need to use the peri bottle, could literally walk around, could use toilet paper. I didn't even feel like I gave birth. I literally felt like $1 million, and I was so happy not to be pregnant. I felt more confident in my abilities as a parent and just as a woman in general. I was so proud of my body because I did end up losing all of my baby weight like I had said before, and I knew my body was going to bounce back, but I never worked out. I still had never worked out, and my body was taking a huge hit on that because I had no more muscle weight at all. Like I looked very frail and weak, and I did feel weak later on, later on in my postpartum. So right after I had Darin, I felt amazing, and then as months went on, my body was like, all right, like you need muscle, girl, like you need to strengthen your body, because I felt like I was like run over by a truck. I was working that same serving job that made me incredibly anxious every time I went in. I also really wanted to exclusively breastfeed Darin, but because I had to go back to work, like pumping was just not an option. I felt very guilty every time I would ask to pump because I had to pump like every 2 to 3 hours, and that's 2 to 3 times during my shift for like 20 to 30 minutes. Like I knew it was inconvenient, at least that's how I felt. And I think it played a huge part in me being very depressed again. So like I said, I dropped down to 94 pounds, and that has been the smallest that I had ever been. I ended up getting better by myself. I don't really know how. It was kind of just one of those things, like you either do or you don't, and you have to show up for your kids. Like my glass was half empty, and I was continually pouring into my children and just left with nothing. Postpartum after Hudson was kind of just routine for me at that point. Again, I felt nothing down there. I felt great, like nothing hurt, no abrasions, no tearing, didn't need to use my peri bottle, but my body definitely hurt. I felt like I was hit by a bus. I literally was like walking around like this, like so slow, like I needed like a cane or something. Other than that, I feel very blessed that my body has been able to carry 3 babies back to back. I am so happy that all my children are healthy and they're happy and they are thriving and living their best life as little babies and toddlers. So my body and mental health now have definitely gone through a lot of changes. I have a lot of loose skin in my stomach, especially after my 3rd pregnancy. That is really when I noticed a lot of loose skin. I had really bad postpartum hair loss. Like I have a lot of hair breakage like everywhere. Like a lot of my strands are very short. Right now is not really good representation of what it looks like, but I do have like a lot of hair breakage. I also have like a mom pouch, or like pudge, or whatever people want to call it. I will be showing you in a second, but I'm just gonna explain it really quick. I am not embarrassed at all. I was embarrassed a couple years ago. Like if you had asked me after my 1st pregnancy, like I would have been extremely ashamed, and now I am not ashamed or embarrassed whatsoever. I think birth and pregnancy is beautiful. My weight has fluctuated a lot in the past 3 years. I want to say I'm around like 102, 103 pounds right now. My hips are a whole lot wider than they used to be. I have like no muscle left in my boobs whatsoever. Like I could throw one of those things over my shoulder and call it a day. I still am exclusively nurse feeding Hudson. We hit 8 months today. That's crazy to think about. I've always wanted to do that. Okay, it's the next day. I'm in the boys' room. They have a very blue wall, and I'm hoping you can see a lot of things better than with the whiteboard behind me. So I'm gonna show you guys what my body looks like now. I am 8 months postpartum. I will be 9 months postpartum on the 19th. The biggest change with my body is just my boobs. Can't show you my boobs. I'm not gonna show you my boobs, but I have a lot of loose skin. I have stretch marks that have now faded, so you can see like the lines, but they're not dark and purple anymore. And then I do have stretch marks on my hips, but those no longer have color either. It was honestly right after Landon's pregnancy when I got the stretch marks, and then they didn't really come back or get worse after each baby, just because they were really, really bad the first time around. I'm gonna show you my stomach. I do have ab separation. So this is my stomach 8 months postpartum, not flexing, just natural. I still got a bump going on. I have ab separation, which I've had with all 3 of my babies, which can be fixed with exercises. I don't know if you're gonna be able to tell, but this side of my stomach sticks out more than this side. And it's just because my core muscles on this side are non-existent compared to this side. So after I eat, this side sticks out a little bit more. Flexing though, this is what it looks like. I mean, that's just normal, I guess, but I have like a lot of loose skin around in my stomach. You can see right here. And then especially like when I lean over, I have a lot of loose skin down here. And yeah, that is what's going on down here. I do have a stretch mark right above my belly button. Actually, I got this because when I got my belly button pierced, the skin was already pierced and thin, so when it stretched out, I got like a little stretch mark right here. Also, my belly button is like now hooded. It used to be a very nice belly button, and now it's like just being eaten by my stomach. So that's what's going on. with my stomach. I hope if you're going through something similar, you don't feel as alone. I love YouTube. It is the place that makes me feel like I'm not alone. I didn't even know that there were a community of mothers out here. I have been so empowered by so many of you guys. So thank you so much for subscribing to my channel, leaving me the nice comments and DMs on Instagram. You guys are so amazing and beautiful. So thank you so much for following me along in my journey as a mom and a person in general. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.